Power thrives on fear. And for years, the city had been ruled by men who knew how to wield it. No one dared to challenge them, because those who did never got the chance to regret it. So when Isaiah and Naomi Carter walked through their streets, heads held high, unafraid, it was taken as an insult. They were supposed to lower their gaze, supposed to know their place, but they didn't. And that alone was enough to make them targets. The gang saw them as easy prey, outsiders, alone, outnumbered, weak. A few threats, maybe a little violence. They'd send the right message. It had always worked before. They didn't realize, they couldn't have known, was that Isaiah, a former Special Forces operative, and Naomi, an ex-military intelligence officer, had spent years dismantling violent networks, eliminating threats, and surviving battlefields far worse than this. They had fought in war zones where the stakes were life and death, had taken down organizations more ruthless and more disciplined than this gang could ever hope to be. The mistake was theirs. The consequences would be brutal, because by the time they understood what they were up against, their entire empire would already be collapsing around them. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe. The city hadn't changed, just the people in it. Isaiah Carter stepped out of the cab, taking a slow breath as the heat of the pavement hit him. The familiar scent of street food, motor oil, and distant cigarette smoke filled the air. It should have felt like home. It didn't. Naomi Carter adjusted her jacket, slipping her sunglasses down just enough to scan the area. She didn't like the feeling in the air. It was thick with something unspoken. "Still looks the same," she muttered. "But it doesn't feel right." Isaiah didn't respond. He didn't need to. He felt it too. The streets were quieter than he remembered. Conversations cut short when they walked by. People moved a little faster, heads down. And then there were the ones who didn't look away at all. Across the street, 3 men leaned against a tagged-up brick wall, watching them with too much interest. Isaiah knew that look. It wasn't the usual territorial glare of gang members marking their turf. It was deeper, heavier, the kind of look that weighed what a person was worth before deciding if they belonged. One of them, a heavy-set guy with a shaved head and mean eyes, nudged his friend and whispered something. The second, a blonde with a scar along his jaw, smirked and nodded. They weren't being subtle. Isaiah and Naomi weren't just outsiders to them. They were something worse. Mr. Thompson, an old barbershop owner, was sweeping his front stoop when he saw them. His grip on the broom tightened. He glanced at the 3 watching men, then back at the Carters, shaking his head before walking toward them fast. "You 2 need to leave. Now." Isaiah frowned. "Didn't even say hello first? This ain't the place you left, son." Mr. Thompson's voice was low, urgent. "People like them run things now, and they don't take kindly to folks like you." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? You don't want trouble." Isaiah wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had already found them. Scarjaw stepped forward, his voice carrying. "Well, well. Thought we got rid of y'all," his friend grinned, resting a hand on his belt, where a heavy bulge hinted at a concealed weapon. "Guess some folks don't know when they ain't welcome no more." Naomi smiled. "Not friendly. Must have been a different Carter. 'Cause no one's ever run me anywhere." Isaiah stayed calm. But Naomi? She was 2 seconds from making an example out of them. Mr. Thompson touched Isaiah's shoulder. "Walk away, son." Isaiah nodded. "You're right." Then, low enough for Naomi to hear, he murmured, "But they don't want us to." The 3 men pushed off the wall, moving toward them now, slow, smirking, testing. The 3 men moved forward, not in a hurry, not charging in, just closing the space between them and the Carters with the kind of confidence that came from never having to be afraid of the answer. Isaiah had seen that kind of walk before. So had Naomi. It wasn't just about getting in their way. It was a show. A slow, deliberate statement. "You don't belong here, and we want you to know it." Naomi adjusted her jacket, shifting her weight slightly, already reading them. Not nervous, not worried, just watching. The blonde one spoke first, smiling like he already knew where this was going. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying that easy kind of drawl people used when they thought they were in control. "What do we have here?" His thick-set friend chuckled, shaking his head. "Thought we cleaned this place up." His grin widened as he looked at them both, like he was letting them in on a joke. Guess some things still slip through the cracks. Isaiah didn't react, didn't shift, didn't even blink. Naomi smiled, just enough to be noticeable. "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" she asked. Blondie's smirk grew, his shoulders dropping slightly, relaxing, like this was already decided. "Just sayin'," he said, pretending to be polite, pretending it wasn't meant as an insult. "We don't see your kind walking through here much anymore." Isaiah kept his face blank. Naomi let out a small breath, like she was already bored. "So, let me get this straight," she said. "We're walking, and somehow that's a problem?" The third man, the one Naomi had already picked out as the leader, stepped forward, just half a step, just enough to make sure they understood where this was going. "See," he said, voice slow and even, "when we don't know a face, we assume it don't belong." Isaiah met his stare. "That a rule?" The man nodded, smirking. "Just how things work now." He glanced between them, still measuring, still deciding. "And you?" His smirk widened. "You don't work here." Isaiah gave the smallest tilt of his head. Behind them, Mr. Thompson had stopped sweeping. His broom hovered just above the sidewalk, his fingers gripping the handle a little tighter. "You two should keep walking," the old man murmured, his voice calm, but his meaning clear. "Ain't nothing worth proving here." Scarjaw, because that's what Naomi had decided to call him, ignored him completely, didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him, because people like him didn't have to. Naomi exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "You know," she said, tilting her chin, "you talk like you matter." Scarjaw's smirk faltered for a second, then returned. He straightened, shifting his weight forward, just enough to test them. Isaiah sighed quietly. "Here we go." "You know," Scarjaw said, rolling his shoulders, "I was gonna be nice. Maybe just let you walk away. But your attitude?" He smiled wider, showing teeth now, but it wasn't amusement. It was something else. "That's gonna cost you." Naomi tilted her head. "Let me guess. Now, you're gonna try and make a point?" Scarjaw's grin widened. "Nah," he said, taking another step forward. "Now we're gonna teach one." Isaiah didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even tense. Naomi barely sighed, already unimpressed. Then Mr. Thompson slammed his broom against the sidewalk. The sharp crack echoed through the air, and for the first time, Scarjaw and his men flinched. Mr. Thompson didn't wait for them to recover. He stepped forward, planting the broom in front of him, his gaze heavy and unwavering. "You done?" Scarjaw blinked. "What?" "I said, you done?" "Mister." Thompson tapped the broom against the pavement again. "Far as I can see, you're standing in front of my shop, talking like you run something. But you don't." Scarjaw clenched his jaw, exhaling hard through his nose. His men were waiting for his reaction. Isaiah watched him carefully. That hesitation? It wasn't just ego. It was something else. They weren't used to pushback, and that meant something. Scarjaw wiped at his nose, sniffing hard like he was forcing himself to stay calm. But Isaiah could see the frustration bubbling just under the surface. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He had walked into this expecting an easy win, a few smug words, some intimidation, and two nobodies backing down like everyone else did. But Isaiah and Naomi weren't backing down. Blondie rubbed at his jaw, his smirk long gone, and the big one shifted his weight from foot to foot, his fingers flexing like he was waiting for an excuse to start swinging. Scarjaw exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You should have just walked." Isaiah stayed still, voice calm. "Still can." Scarjaw let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Yeah, see, that ain't how this works." He gestured vaguely toward them. "You show up, act like you don't hear what's being said, act like this ain't already decided. That's disrespect." Naomi crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. "Maybe if you had something worth respecting." Scarjaw's face darkened, his jaw clenched, nostrils flaring, that last sliver of patience snapping. A muscle in the big one's jaw twitched, and Blondie shifted again, agitated, restless. "You got a real smart mouth, you know that?" Scarjaw muttered. Naomi smiled, slow and taunting. "People keep telling me that." Scarjaw rolled his tongue against the inside of his cheek, eyes narrowing. "You think this is funny?" "A little," she admitted. Scarjaw's fingers curled into fists, but he hadn't thrown the first punch yet. Not quite. Isaiah's gaze flicked past him, down the street, to the black sedan idling at the end of the block. The driver wasn't trying to hide the fact that he was watching. That meant something. Scarjaw followed his eyes, glancing over his shoulder at the car, then back at Isaiah, his expression shifting, something calculating flickering behind his anger. He wasn't just posturing anymore, he was deciding. Scarjaw ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. "See? The thing about respect?" he muttered. "It ain't just about what you do. It's about what people see. And right now," he gestured around them at the storefronts, the few scattered bystanders watching from a distance, some from behind windows, silent witnesses to a brewing storm. "People are seeing the wrong thing." Isaiah didn't blink. "Sounds like a personal problem." Scarjaw grinned, but there was no humor in it. "See? I can't just let this go, 'cause if I do," he clicked his tongue, glancing at his boys, then back to Isaiah. "Then people start thinking it's okay to just walk through here like they own the place. Like we ain't built something here." Naomi snorted. "Built what? A bunch of idiots standing around talking about respect?" The big one shifted at that, his jaw tightening. Scarjaw's grin twitched. "See? That right there? That's why I gotta make an example." Blondie cracked his knuckles, rolling his shoulders, eyes locked on Naomi now. The big one exhaled sharply, like he was barely keeping himself in check. Isaiah could feel it, the fight balancing on a razor's edge. The only thing keeping it from starting was Scarjaw waiting for the perfect moment. The right trigger. Naomi gave him one. She let her eyes drop to his shoes, then back up. One eyebrow raised. "I mean, I'd say I'm sorry, but I don't think I can respect a man who wears knockoff Jordans." Scarjaw's face twitched. Blondie actually took a step forward. Isaiah sighed. Naomi grinned wider. "Oh, my mistake. That's why you're mad." Scarjaw's fingers flexed again, but this time he didn't stop himself. He reached forward fast, grabbing the front of Isaiah's shirt, yanking him forward, and Isaiah let him. Scarjaw pulled him in close, their faces inches apart. "You ain't walking out of here the way you came in," Scarjaw murmured, voice low, a quiet promise. Isaiah met his eyes, completely steady. "Neither are you." For a split second, nothing happened. The world held its breath. Then, a glass bottle smashed against the ground. Someone had thrown it from the alley. Scarjaw's grip tightened. Blondie's fist clenched. The big one exhaled through his nose, shoulders rolling back. And then, the first punch flew. Scarjaw's grip on Isaiah's shirt tightened for just a second before he let go. But the moment he stepped back, the atmosphere shifted. There was no more posturing, no more intimidation, no more need for words. The fight was coming whether they wanted it or not. Blondie was the first to move, his frustration boiling over as he swung wildly at Naomi, his punch cutting through the air faster than expected. Naomi twisted to avoid it, but the space was too tight, and his knuckles clipped her cheekbone, sending a sharp jolt of pain across her face. The hit wasn't enough to do real damage, but it was enough to make her back up a step, recalibrating. He was quicker than she'd thought, but he still had too much ego in his swings, too much belief that one good punch would end it. Isaiah barely had time to register it before the big one charged him like a freight train, using his sheer size and power to drive him backward. The impact slammed Isaiah against the side of a parked car, metal groaning under the force. His spine jolted from the hit, but he had barely a second to react before Scarjaw followed up, driving a knee into his ribs with enough force to send a shock of pain through his torso. Isaiah gritted his teeth, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, he twisted hard, forcing his body away from the car just in time to bring his elbow up into Scarjaw's face. The sharp crack of bone against bone sending the gang leader stumbling back. Blood dripped from Scarjaw's nose, but he didn't go down, and from the way he wiped at it with the back of his hand, he wasn't planning on stopping anytime soon. Naomi had already recovered from the hit she'd taken, but Blondie was still pressing forward, coming at her again, throwing another punch that was too wide, too eager. She stepped inside his reach this time, her hands moving fast as she redirected the force of his swing, grabbing his wrist and driving her knee into his stomach with enough force to make him double over. He wheezed, but before she could follow up, the big guy grabbed her from the side, thick arms wrapping around her torso as he lifted her off the ground and threw her back against the car Isaiah had just been pinned against. The breath left her lungs in a painful gasp, and for a moment, everything blurred. She had taken worse hits before, but the force rattled through her body in a way that made her pause longer than she wanted to. Isaiah saw it happen at the same time as Scarjaw rushed him again, fist cocked back. Isaiah caught the incoming punch, twisting Scarjaw's arm just enough to send him off balance before driving his knee into the side of his leg. Scarjaw grunted, staggering sideways. But he wasn't going down that easy. The gang leader was already adjusting, already shifting his weight, already swinging again. But Isaiah was faster, dodging to the side as Scarjaw's knuckles skimmed his jaw. Naomi didn't stay down long. She twisted her body the second she felt her feet hit the pavement again, breaking the big man's grip just enough to give herself space to move. He tried to grab her again, but she was already shifting, her heel driving down against his knee with enough force to make him stumble. That gave her just enough time to slam the back of her head into his face, a sharp burst of pain flaring at the base of her skull, but she heard the grunt of pain from behind her and felt his grip weaken entirely. Isaiah barely had time to process that before Scarjaw came at him again, his movements sloppier now, more aggressive, less controlled. He threw a jab aimed for Isaiah's ribs, testing, seeing if the earlier hit had slowed him down, but Isaiah caught the motion fast, dodging just enough to counter with a sharp right hook to Scarjaw's jaw. The gang leader gritted his teeth, taking the hit, but refusing to stumble this time. He spat blood onto the pavement, his breathing heavier now, but there was still too much energy in his stance, too much pride keeping him upright. The sound of footsteps behind them was the only warning before more figures emerged from the alley. 4 more gang members stepping forward, each one moving with the confidence of men who knew they had the numbers now. Isaiah didn't turn to face them, but he felt Naomi shift beside him, knew she had already counted the new arrivals, already weighed their odds. Scarjaw wiped the blood from his mouth, his grin still there, but darker now. "You two really should have walked," Naomi exhaled, stretching out her shoulders, rolling her neck like she was getting ready for a workout. "I don't know. I kind of like it here." One of the newcomers rushed at her first, fast and reckless, throwing a kick aimed at her ribs. Naomi reacted instantly, her reflexes taking over as she caught his leg mid-air, twisting his foot to the side with just enough force to send him sprawling onto the pavement. His body hit the ground with a thud, but she was already turning before he had even fully landed, already preparing for the next attack. Isaiah wasn't as lucky. The second new guy went for him fast, aiming a sharp uppercut toward his ribs. The hit landed, knocking the wind out of him for half a second, pain flaring through his torso. He absorbed it, rolling with the impact, but he knew he couldn't take too many more like that. Another fist came, but this time he was ready, catching the attacker's wrist and twisting hard, sending him into the side of the car. Scarjaw wasn't done either. He lunged at Isaiah again, swinging hard, no finesse, just brute force, and Isaiah barely dodged in time. The two were locked in close combat now, fists flying, each movement precise but fueled by something raw, something personal. Naomi had her own hands full, blocking a series of punches from another thug, her breath steady even as one of them grazed past her shoulder. The fight wasn't just about skill anymore. It was about endurance, about who could last the longest, who would break first. And neither Isaiah nor Naomi had any plans of breaking. Scarred Jaw was breathing hard, his stance less sure than it had been just minutes ago. His men were falling one by one, and the fight had lasted far longer than he'd expected. This wasn't supposed to be a battle. It was supposed to be a message, a lesson in control. But as he wiped the blood from his lip and saw Isaiah and Naomi still standing, still unfazed, still moving like this wasn't the first time they'd had to fight for their lives, he realized he had made a mistake, a big one. Isaiah deflected a wild punch from one of the gang members, ducking low before stepping in fast and slamming a hard fist into the man's ribs. The impact made the thug grunt in pain. But Isaiah didn't stop there. He grabbed the man's collar, pulled him forward, and drove his knee up into his gut, knocking the wind out of him completely before shoving him aside. Naomi was still handling two of them at once, but her movements were precise, practiced, fluid and deadly in a way that wasn't natural for a street brawler. She dodged one punch, then another, then spun to the side and sent a sharp kick into the side of one guy's knee. He yelped, stumbling, and she followed up fast, grabbing his arm and twisting it into a painful joint lock before throwing him to the ground. Scarjaw took a step back, his confidence starting to waver. But the big guy, the last real muscle he had left in the fight, was still standing, still swinging. He was bleeding, breathing hard, but he was still dangerous. Naomi barely dodged his next punch, twisting away just in time. He adjusted fast, slamming his shoulder into her, sending her skidding backward into the alley wall. For the first time, Isaiah saw Naomi wince, saw her roll her shoulders before shaking it off, her breath steady but measured. That hit had landed. The big guy grinned, his knuckles cracked and bloodied. "Not so tough now, are you?" Naomi lifted her chin, smirking. "You hit like a drunk toddler." The big guy roared, charging her. She sidestepped him at the last second, twisting, grabbing his arm, and using his own momentum to send him crashing face first into a dumpster. The metal dented on impact. Isaiah turned just in time to block another hit from one of the stragglers. But Scarjaw wasn't trying to fight anymore. He was trying to escape. Isaiah saw him move, saw him glance toward the end of the alley, toward the street, toward an opening. His instincts kicked in immediately. "He's running!" Isaiah called out. Naomi, still catching her breath, looked up just as Scarjaw turned and bolted. One of his men tried to slow them down, throwing himself at Isaiah. It didn't work. Isaiah caught the thug mid-charge, twisted him around, and threw him into the pile of bodies already littering the alley. Naomi moved fast, but Scarjaw was already past the alley's mouth, already sprinting for an opening in the street. For a moment, Isaiah debated chasing him down, debated ending this here and now, but then a black sedan, parked at the far end of the street, rumbled to life. Naomi saw it too. Scarjaw ran toward it, waving his arms frantically, and the car peeled forward, tires screeching against the pavement. Scarjaw barely had time to yank open the door before diving inside, the car accelerating the second he was in, speeding off into the night. Isaiah and Naomi slowed, watching it go, breathing hard. Naomi wiped the back of her hand across her mouth, smearing away a small streak of blood from where she'd taken a hit earlier. "So much for finishing the lesson." Isaiah exhaled through his nose, rolling his shoulders. "We weren't the ones that needed it." Behind them, the alley was filled with groaning, barely moving gang members, the ones who hadn't managed to escape or weren't in any condition to run. Blondie was on his hands and knees, coughing, his face smeared with sweat and dirt. The big guy was still slumped against the dumpster, one hand clutching his ribs. The rest were either unconscious or too hurt to stand. Isaiah glanced at Naomi, his voice quieter now. "That car." She nodded. "Yeah, I saw it. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had been watching, and they'd come for Scarjaw when they realized the fight was lost." Naomi let out a slow breath. "So, either he's got some real generous friends, or he just ran to someone a hell of a lot worse than him. Isaiah finished. Neither of them liked the second option. The sound of sirens wailed faintly in the distance, still far but getting closer. The fight had been loud. Someone had called it in. Naomi tilted her head toward the street. We should go. Isaiah didn't argue. They left the alley behind, stepping out into the dim glow of the streetlights, the weight of the fight still settling into their bones. Their ribs ached, their muscles sore, but that wasn't what was bothering Isaiah. It was the fact that Scarjaw had been running to someone, and whoever that someone was, they had just noticed Isaiah and Naomi Carter. The alley was behind them, but the fight hadn't left their bodies yet. Isaiah could still feel the ache in his ribs where Scarjaw's knee had landed, and Naomi had a thin cut on her cheek, where Blondie's knuckles had grazed her skin. They didn't speak for the first few minutes, their footsteps echoing in the dimly lit streets, both of them processing, thinking, calculating the next move. Scarjaw had gotten away. That meant he was going to regroup, going to warn whoever was pulling the strings, and that meant Naomi wasn't about to waste any time. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving fast across the screen. Isaiah didn't have to ask what she was doing. He already knew. You got something? He asked as they turned a corner, keeping a steady pace, but moving with purpose. Not yet, Naomi muttered, her focus locked on her screen. But I will. Isaiah exhaled, rolling his shoulders. We don't even know what we're looking for. Naomi stopped walking, tucking her phone away as she turned to face him. Yes, we do. She lifted a finger, counting off. 1. Scarjaw was running, not fighting. That means someone higher up is calling the shots, and he was more scared of them than us. She held up another finger. 2. That black sedan wasn't just parked there by accident. Someone was watching, waiting, and when things went bad, they came to pick up their guy. Isaiah nodded. So, we start with the car. Exactly. Naomi pulled out her phone again and started dialing. And I know just the person to help us find it. Isaiah smirked slightly. We're calling cops now? Not cops. Naomi lifted the phone to her ear. Just one. Isaiah sighed, stuffing his hands in his pockets as he scanned the streets, keeping an eye out for trouble. I'm guessing it's someone you trust. Mostly. Naomi's expression didn't change as the line picked up. Let's see if she picks up. A moment later, a voice came through the speaker. Naomi? Detective Morales. Naomi greeted smoothly, her voice taking on the controlled, confident tone she used when she needed something. It's been a while. There was a pause on the other end. Then Morales sighed. Yeah, it has. And I'm guessing you're not calling just to catch up. Naomi grinned slightly. You know me too well. Isaiah listened as they walked, staying quiet while Naomi worked. Morales had been a contact of Naomi's for years, back when she was still working intelligence. They had a mutual respect. Morales was one of the few clean cops left in a department riddled with corruption, and Naomi had helped her out more than once when she needed off-the-record intel. But Naomi didn't call in favors lightly. Morales knew that. Go ahead, Morales said after a brief pause. What's going on? Naomi didn't waste time. I need a plate run. Black sedan, tinted windows, picked up a gang leader named Scarjaw after a fight about 20 minutes ago. Morales groaned. Why does it not surprise me that you're in the middle of something violent? It wasn't my fault this time, Naomi said, completely serious. Isaiah snorted quietly. Morales sighed. All right, I can't promise much. The department's been getting pressure to stay out of certain cases. Lots of people looking the other way lately. Naomi's expression hardened slightly. So the rot's getting worse. Morales hesitated. Yeah. Then, after a pause, she added, but I'll run it. If this guy is connected to someone bigger, we'll know soon enough. Send me whatever you find, Naomi said. You know that's not how it works, Morales replied. Naomi smirked. Yeah. I owe you one, Morales scoffed. You already owe me 5. The call ended. Naomi tucked her phone away, her mind already moving 5 steps ahead. She'll get something, she said. In the meantime, we work our own leads. Isaiah arched a brow. We have leads? Naomi gave him a pointed look. Scarjaw's gang isn't big enough to run this area alone. Someone else is funding them, protecting them. We start by figuring out who's supplying them. Isaiah exhaled, nodding. Weapons? Drugs? All of the above, Naomi muttered. Street gangs don't make money off intimidation alone. Someone is putting resources into this, and that means there's a paper trail. Isaiah smirked. And you're going to find it. Naomi didn't even hesitate. Damn right I am. The two kept moving, disappearing into the night as the city hummed around them. They didn't know who they were up against yet, but by the time Naomi was done, they would. The intel came faster than Naomi had expected, but it wasn't good news. Detective Morales called back within an hour. Her tone clipped, her words carrying the edge of someone who wasn't thrilled about what she'd uncovered. The plate came back clean, like I expected. No hits in the system. Either it's a ghost car or someone scrubbing records. Naomi leaned against the wall of the dimly lit safe house she and Isaiah had rented for the night, a slight frown pulling at her lips. Which means this Scarjaw guy's got backing from someone who knows how to stay invisible. That's not all, Morales added. I dug a little deeper into the gang itself, and there's chatter. Your friend Scarjaw is small-time compared to who he's working for. Word is, there's someone higher up, a guy running the show, keeping things clean, making sure nothing ties back to him. Naomi's grip on the phone tightened. You got a name? Morales hesitated. Not exactly. Nobody's saying it outright. But there's a nickname floating around. They're calling him Kane. The name hung in the air for a moment, weighty and foreboding. Anything else? Naomi asked, her voice calm but sharp. Just whispers, Morales said. Big operations moving into your area. Drugs, weapons, the works. If you're tangling with these people, you're going up against more than just a gang. This is organized. Naomi nodded to herself. Thanks, Morales. Keep me posted. The call ended, and she turned to Isaiah, who was sitting on the edge of the room's battered couch, his arms crossed. Kane, she said simply. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. And we don't know who he is. Not yet, Naomi replied, already pacing. But Scarjaw knows, and if we want him to talk, we need to make it impossible for him not to. Isaiah leaned forward slightly. You're thinking a trap, Naomi nodded. We dangle the right bait, and Scarjaw will come running. He's too desperate to prove himself after that mess earlier. Bait like what? Naomi smirked. Something they can't afford to ignore. Weapons, money, territory. Isaiah leaned back, considering. And how do we make it look real? Naomi already had an answer. We leak the right information to the right people. Rumors of a new player moving into their turf, cutting into their business. Someone big enough to be a threat, but new enough to be believable. Isaiah tilted his head. And who's this new player supposed to be? Naomi's grin widened. Us. Setting the trap wasn't easy. It took hours of careful planning. Naomi's experience and intelligence showing through as she pieced together a believable backstory for their fake operation. Isaiah worked alongside her, making calls, planting rumors, creating the illusion of a rival gang looking to muscle into Scarjaw's territory. By morning, the word was out. A shipment of weapons was supposedly being moved through an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. An easy target for someone like Scarjaw, who couldn't afford to let a new player go unchecked. The siblings positioned themselves inside the warehouse, the dim lighting casting long shadows over the crates they'd arranged to look like cargo. There was nothing inside but empty boxes, but from the outside, it looked convincing enough to fool anyone not paying close attention. Isaiah adjusted his stance near one of the upper walkways, his eyes scanning the entrance below. You sure this is going to work? Naomi, crouched beside him, her eyes locked on the street outside, nodded. He'll show. He doesn't have a choice. If he doesn't, it makes him look weak. Kane won't tolerate that. Isaiah glanced at her. And if this Kane guy shows up instead? Naomi's expression didn't change. Then, we adapt. It wasn't long before the sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the night. Headlights swept across the warehouse walls, and Naomi tensed, her fingers ghosting over the hilt of her concealed knife. They're here, Isaiah muttered. The first car stopped just outside, its doors swinging open. Scarjaw stepped out, his face still bruised from the earlier fight, his posture tense, but his confidence clearly bolstered by the group of men piling out of the other vehicles behind him. Isaiah counted at least a dozen. Naomi's jaw tightened. He brought half the gang. Scarjaw strode toward the warehouse, his eyes scanning the shadows. "You think you can just move into my territory and not pay for it?" he called out, his voice carrying through the cavernous space. "You think I wouldn't notice?" Naomi motioned for Isaiah to stay put as she stepped forward into the light, her movements calm, deliberate. "Funny," she said, her voice echoing slightly. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Scarjaw's eyes narrowed, recognition flashing across his face. "You!" he spat. Naomi's grin was sharp. "Me!" Scarjaw glanced around, his men fanning out behind him, their weapons visible now. Pipes, bats, a few knives glinting in the faint light. "You're making a big mistake," Scarjaw growled. Naomi shrugged. "Seems like we've been making a lot of those lately." Isaiah stepped into view on the walkway above, his presence drawing Scarjaw's attention upward. "You ready to talk yet?" Isaiah asked, his tone steady. Scarjaw sneered. "I don't talk to dead men." Naomi's grin didn't falter, her eyes sharp as she watched Scarjaw's men take their positions. "That's the thing about traps," she said lightly. "Sometimes you don't see them until you're already in them." Scarjaw froze, his gaze darting around the warehouse as realization began to sink in. Naomi's voice dropped, her grin fading into something cold, dangerous. "And right now, you're in one." Scarjaw's posture shifted the second Naomi spoke, his body tensing as he realized he wasn't in control anymore. The arrogance that had been dripping off him earlier was gone, replaced with something more cautious, something more calculating. His eyes darted around the warehouse, taking in the elevated walkways, the stacked crates, the dark corners where shadows could hide more than just two people. He thought it was an ambush. Good. Isaiah leaned casually against the railing above, his arms crossed, watching Scarjaw's every move. Naomi stood at ground level, her stance loose but firm, radiating the quiet confidence of someone who wasn't worried about how this was going to end. Scarjaw licked his lips, exhaling slowly. He wasn't panicked. Not yet. But Naomi could see the gears turning, could see him measuring his options. "You're looking a little nervous, Scar," Isaiah said from above, his voice calm, steady. "You should be." Scarjaw chuckled, a short, humorless sound. "Yeah? And why's that?" Naomi took a slow step forward, her boots tapping lightly against the warehouse floor. "Because you and I both know you're standing in the middle of a trap," she said evenly. "And right now, you don't know if it's already been sprung." Scarjaw's nostrils flared. "You think you scare me?" "No," Naomi said, tilting her head slightly. "But the man you work for? Cain. He does." Scarjaw's smirk twitched. Isaiah saw it too. He straightened slightly, watching the way Scarjaw's body stiffened at the mention of Cain, how his bravado slipped just for a second before he forced it back into place. "You want to find Cain?" Scarjaw scoffed, shaking his head. "You're out of your damn minds." Naomi crossed her arms. "You keep saying that like it's supposed to change something." Scarjaw exhaled through his nose. He was weighing his next move, trying to decide if it was smarter to talk or fight his way out. Naomi made the decision for him. She moved fast, too fast for him to react. Before he could step back, she had him by the collar, yanking him forward, twisting him off balance, forcing him to the ground with a brutal efficiency that wasn't just street fighting. It was training. Scarjaw hit the concrete hard, coughing as Naomi pressed a knee into his chest. "You think Cain's coming to save you?" she murmured, her voice calm, almost conversational. "Because I think you're running out of time." Scarjaw gritted his teeth, wincing. "You don't get it," he rasped. "This ain't just a gang. Cain's not some street boss you can shake down. He's ex-military, special forces. You're messing with something you can't stop." Isaiah's expression darkened slightly. "Military?" Scarjaw nodded, still breathing hard. "Not just him. Half his crew." Real soldiers, the kind that don't leave loose ends. Isaiah and Naomi exchanged a quick glance. This wasn't just some organized crime ring. This was something deeper. Naomi leaned in closer. Where is he? Scarjaw let out another rough chuckle, shaking his head. You don't find Cain. He finds you. Isaiah stepped off the walkway, landing lightly on his feet, approaching them. Then how do we make him come to us? Scarjaw was about to answer when his eyes flickered toward something past Naomi's shoulder. His smirk widened. Before Naomi could react, a sharp whistle cut through the air. She barely had time to register it before a crate came crashing down from above, shattering on impact just feet from where she knelt over Scarjaw. Isaiah saw the movement from the upper level, a figure slipping back into the shadows after kicking the crate loose. Scarjaw took the opening. He bucked hard, twisting his body, shoving Naomi off just enough to scramble free. Naomi recovered fast, but Scarjaw was already moving. Isaiah lunged from the side, intercepting him before he could reach the back door. He tackled the gang leader, both of them crashing into a stack of wooden pallets. Scarjaw hit hard, grunting as he struggled, fists swinging wildly. Isaiah absorbed one punch to the ribs before twisting Scarjaw's arm behind his back, forcing him down onto the ground. Scarjaw fought like a man who knew what was coming if he got caught. Naomi was already on her feet, advancing fast, but the sound of footsteps slamming against metal made her look up. More of Scarjaw's men were here. From the upper levels, 3 figures dropped down onto the warehouse floor, moving fast. They weren't charging in like idiots. They were coordinated, precise, trained. Scarjaw laughed through his panting. Told you, he muttered. You ain't ready. Naomi exhaled sharply. Isaiah, we need to move. Isaiah didn't hesitate. He grabbed Scarjaw by the collar, yanking him up to his feet. You're coming with us? Scarjaw snarled, struggling, but Isaiah kept his grip tight. Naomi turned just as the first attacker reached her. She sidestepped the incoming punch, caught his wrist, twisted hard, and drove a sharp knee into his ribs. He gasped, stumbling, and she finished him with a brutal forearm strike to the back of the head. The second man was on Isaiah, swinging hard. Isaiah blocked high, absorbed the next hit to his side, then drove his elbow into the guy's throat. The attacker choked, backing off. Scarjaw saw his opening. He slammed his heel down onto Isaiah's foot, twisted out of his grip, and bolted. Naomi cursed, already chasing after him. Scarjaw didn't make it far. Isaiah lunged, caught the back of his jacket, and wrenched him backward, sending him crashing into the ground. Scarjaw rolled, panting hard, his fight finally running out. Naomi crouched next to him, grabbing his chin and forcing him to look at her. You're done, she murmured. Start talking. Scarjaw let out a slow, bitter breath, his bravado finally cracking. You want Cain? He muttered. I'll tell you where to start. Isaiah and Naomi exchanged a glance, knowing this wasn't just a lead. This was the beginning of something bigger than either of them had expected. Scarjaw sat slumped against the cold concrete, his breathing heavy, his shoulders rising and falling as he fought to recover from the beating he had taken. The arrogant sneer he had worn earlier was gone, replaced with something more raw, something closer to resignation. He wasn't stupid. He had fought hard, made his escape attempts. But now he knew he wasn't walking out of this unless they let him. Isaiah crouched down in front of him, wiping a streak of blood from his own lip, his knuckles still raw from the fight. Start talking, he said, his voice low and even. Where do we find Cain? Scarjaw exhaled sharply, his head lolling back against the wall. You think it's that easy? His voice was hoarse, tired, but still edged with something sharp. Cain doesn't just sit around waiting for people like you to come knocking. He's got layers, walls. He's 10 steps ahead of you already. Naomi folded her arms, standing beside Isaiah, watching Scarjaw closely. You're still talking like you have choices, she said. You don't. Cain sent people to clean up his mess, and guess what? They failed. That means you're a liability. That means you're already dead to him. Scarjaw's jaw clenched. He knew she was right. He might have escaped them, but Cain wouldn't forgive this. His failure would be seen as weakness, and men like Cain didn't tolerate weakness. Isaiah tilted his head slightly, reading the conflict in Scarjaw's expression. "So, you help us take him down," he said. "And maybe you live long enough to see tomorrow." Scarjaw let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "You don't get it," he muttered. "You're already in the crosshairs. It's not just Cain. He's got people in places you don't even know exist. You think this is just about the streets? It's bigger than that. Cain's been building something." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Building what?" Scarjaw hesitated. Isaiah grabbed him by the front of his shirt, yanking him forward just enough to drive the point home. "We're not asking twice." Scarjaw swallowed hard, his pulse hammering against the side of his neck. Finally, he let out a slow breath. "There's a warehouse," he muttered. "Not the usual street-level operation. This one's different. Big shipments, private security. They don't let just anyone inside." Naomi's mind was already working. "And what's inside?" Scarjaw shook his head. "I don't know everything. I don't ask questions I don't want the answers to. But whatever Cain's moving through there, it's not just drugs or weapons. It's bigger, more important. And if you show up, you'll get more than just his attention." Isaiah's grip tightened. "Where?" Scarjaw hesitated, then muttered an address. Naomi committed it to memory instantly, her instincts telling her this was the lead they needed. If Cain had something big running through that location, then that meant he wouldn't expect an attack there. Isaiah shoved Scarjaw back against the wall and stood. "Smartest thing you've said all night." Scarjaw rubbed at his wrist, his expression shifting, his eyes scanning the room again. Naomi recognized the look. He was planning something. She didn't give him the chance. Before he could try another escape move, she drove her fist into his gut, hard enough to knock the wind out of him. Scarjaw doubled over, wheezing. "Yeah," she muttered. "That's what I thought." Isaiah nodded toward the exit. "We should move before his people start looking again." Naomi agreed. Scarjaw had given them what they needed, and now he was dead weight. Keeping him would slow them down. She leaned down slightly, her voice cold. "If I were you, I'd find a hole and stay in it. Because if Cain's looking for you, you won't last the night." Scarjaw said nothing, just clenched his jaw, his breathing still labored. Naomi and Isaiah stepped out of the warehouse and into the street, the cold air hitting them like a shock to the system. Isaiah rolled his shoulders. "That address. You thinking what I'm thinking?" Naomi exhaled. "Yeah, we hit it fast, hard, before Cain knows we're coming." But even as she said it, her gut told her something else. Cain wasn't just some criminal running an operation. He was former military. That meant he planned ahead. And if Scarjaw was right, then Cain had already set his next move in motion. They were halfway to the safe house when the first explosion hit. The shock wave ripped through the air, a deep, concussive boom that sent a fiery glow washing over the buildings down the block. Isaiah and Naomi instinctively ducked behind cover, shielding themselves from the heat as the blast tore through the night. Smoke and debris filled the air, and Naomi's ears rang from the force of the detonation. Isaiah lifted his head, staring toward the burning wreckage in the distance. His expression darkened. That was the warehouse. Naomi clenched her jaw, already knowing the truth before she even spoke. Cain had wiped it. All the evidence, the shipments, the operation, gone. Scarjaw had barely finished talking, and already Cain was cleaning up. Naomi exhaled sharply, her mind racing. He knew. Isaiah nodded grimly. And now he knows about us. They had barely started their war with Cain, and he had just fired the first real shot. The glow of the explosion still burned against the night sky, thick smoke curling upward as the fire devoured what was left of the warehouse. Naomi and Isaiah stayed low behind a parked car, their breathing controlled, their minds already working through what had just happened. The fire crackled in the distance, but the more pressing concern was the silence that followed. No sirens, no screaming, no chaos. It was too clean. Isaiah wiped soot off his sleeve, his eyes locked on the burning wreckage. "That wasn't a random hit," he muttered. That was a message. Naomi exhaled, rolling her jaw. Kane didn't just wipe the warehouse. He wiped the trail. She glanced at Isaiah. He's telling us to stop looking. Isaiah nodded, rubbing his sore knuckles. Yeah, and if we don't? Naomi's expression hardened. Then he comes for us next. They both knew that was coming. The explosion wasn't panic. It wasn't sloppy damage control. It was precision. Kane had found out they were getting too close, so he burned everything before they could get their hands on it. Which meant they had only one choice left. They had to force his hand. Isaiah stood first, scanning the rooftops, the empty street, looking for whoever had been watching them. Kane had eyes everywhere. That was clear now. But whoever had pulled the trigger on this operation wasn't sticking around. Naomi's fingers were already moving across her phone, her brain shifting gears. Scarjaw said that was Kane's key site, but there's no way it was his only one. We need another lead, Isaiah nodded. You think Morales can dig up something before Kane buries it? Naomi dialed. Let's find out. The phone rang twice before Morales picked up, her voice tight, clipped. Please tell me you weren't near that explosion. Naomi didn't even hesitate. We were on our way to it. Morales let out a sharp breath. Damn it, Naomi. You don't even know how deep this thing goes. Then tell me, Naomi pressed. Because Kane's making moves, and we're running out of time. A pause. Then, a rustling of papers on the other end. Morales was already digging. You're not the only ones looking into him, Morales said, her voice lower now. Word is, some heavy hitters are sniffing around the same operation. Military contractors, ex-special forces types, people way outside your usual gangland thugs. Isaiah narrowed his eyes. Kane's working with mercs? Looks that way, Morales muttered. Whatever he's running, it's got serious backing. And if he's moving money through the city, he's doing it through someone else's hands. Naomi caught the shift in her tone. You found something. Morales hesitated, then sighed. There's a name that keeps popping up on some flagged financial records. Victor Hale, ex-Army Logistics. Used to move supplies for forward bases in the Middle East before he got booted for smuggling arms through military shipments. Now, he's running security contracts for clients that don't want official paperwork. And guess whose name just came up on one of his recent invoices? Naomi's eyes sharpened. Kane. Bingo, Morales said. Hale's running an operation out of an old dockyard. It's under a shell company. But if Kane's using him to move product, that means it's one of his last standing sites. Isaiah looked at Naomi. We hit it before he clears it. Naomi was already pulling up maps, scanning the layout of the area. If this guy's ex-military, he's going to have security. We won't be able to just walk in. Morales snorted. I figured. I pulled some satellite surveillance. Motion activity spiked at the docks right after the explosion. Kane's moving something. Fast. Naomi didn't like coincidences. You think he's pulling out? I think he knows you're still digging, Morales corrected. And that means you have a small window before he locks everything down again. Isaiah glanced at the rising smoke in the distance. Then we move now, Morales sighed. You know I can't officially back this, right? Naomi smirked. Wouldn't expect you to. Morales clicked her tongue. Then don't get yourselves killed. And Naomi, Kane doesn't lose. He eliminates. If you push him, expect him to push back harder. The call ended. Naomi looked at Isaiah, her expression unreadable. We don't have much time. Isaiah flexed his hands, the soreness from the fight barely registering. Then, let's not waste it. The docks were quieter than expected, which only made the tension worse. Stacked shipping containers lined the yard, creating a maze of steel walls, each one a potential hiding spot for Kane's people. The water in the harbor was still, dark under the dim glow of overhead floodlights. Isaiah and Naomi crouched behind a row of crates, eyes scanning the perimeter. Hale's security was visible. Mercs, not street thugs. They were dressed in civilian clothes, but their movements were disciplined, sharp, the way ex-soldiers carried themselves when they were still treating every job like a war zone. We go in quiet, Naomi murmured. We don't know how many are inside. Isaiah nodded, adjusting his stance. We split up, take the high ground, force them to react on our terms. They moved fast, keeping low, using the natural cover of the dockyard to slip past patrols. Naomi climbed up onto a container stack, her movements precise as she maneuvered across the steel beams, giving herself a clear view of the central warehouse. Isaiah took the ground route, moving along the shadows, watching as two guards stood near the entrance, their weapons visible but relaxed. They didn't expect a fight. That was their first mistake. Naomi's voice crackled softly through their earpiece. "Hale's inside. I see him talking to someone. Big guy. Looks military." Isaiah pressed against the side of a container, watching the entrance. "Then we do this fast. Kane's already ahead of us once. We can't let him get ahead again." They exchanged one last glance, silent agreement passing between them. Then they moved. The dockyard smelled like salt and steel, the distant hum of the city barely reaching the cold, quiet waters. Naomi crouched on the stacked shipping containers, her eyes locked on the central warehouse, where Hale and his men were stationed. Below her, Isaiah moved like a shadow between the rows of cargo, his posture loose but ready for action. The guards at the entrance were too comfortable, their body language relaxed. They weren't expecting trouble. Kane's enemies didn't usually make it this far. Naomi's voice crackled softly in Isaiah's earpiece. "Two at the main door. More inside. Hale's meeting with someone, but I can't see who yet." Isaiah pressed himself against the cold steel of a container, his eyes flicking toward the warehouse. "Then we get in before the meeting's over." Naomi didn't respond right away. She was already moving. She climbed higher, her movements controlled and deliberate, reaching the top of the nearest container stack to get a better vantage point. From up here, she could see the dockyard stretching out beneath her, a maze of steel and concrete, patrolled by men who thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. Isaiah took a slow breath, rolling his shoulders before moving in. He reached the first guard at the main entrance before the man even knew he was there. One sharp step, a hand around the guy's mouth, a swift, efficient strike to the pressure point beneath his ear. The guard dropped silently. The second man barely had time to react before Isaiah grabbed him by the collar, drove a knee into his stomach, and slammed him against the container. His body hit the steel with a dull thud, and Isaiah held him there just long enough to ensure he wasn't getting back up. Naomi watched from above, her lips curving slightly. Smooth, she moved quickly across the beams, positioning herself near a skylight. From here, she could see inside, and she didn't like what she saw. Hale was in the center of the room, talking to someone she didn't recognize. A man built like a soldier, his posture rigid, his movements precise. Not street muscle. Something was off. She tapped her earpiece. "Hale's got company. This guy's different. Could be ex-military." Isaiah glanced toward the warehouse entrance. "Then we play it smart." They moved in tandem, Naomi keeping watch from above, while Isaiah pushed deeper inside. The warehouse smelled like oil and metal, the dim lighting casting long shadows across the floor. Stacks of crates were scattered throughout the space, some sealed, some partially open. Naomi spotted weapons, tactical gear, crates marked with military insignia. This wasn't just a gang operation, this was something else. Isaiah crept through the maze of cargo, his footsteps silent. He could hear Hale's voice now, rough and edged with frustration. "Not my problem if you're losing shipments. That's on you," Hale was saying. The other man, the soldier, spoke calmly. "You don't seem to understand. Kane doesn't tolerate mistakes. If you can't secure your end, he'll find someone else who can." Hale stiffened. "You threatening me?" Naomi tensed slightly. This was it. Isaiah positioned himself closer, behind a stack of crates, waiting for the right moment. The soldier continued, unbothered. "I don't need to threaten you. Kane already gave his orders. You're either useful to the operation, or you're disposable." Hale's expression shifted. He understood what that meant. Naomi exhaled slowly. "They're about to take Hale off the board." Isaiah nodded to himself. "Then let's make sure they don't." They moved. Naomi dropped first, landing with perfect precision between the stacks of crates, her presence a sudden disruption that made every head snap toward her. Hale barely had time to react. before Isaiah stepped out from behind the cargo, his stance low, ready. The soldier's eyes narrowed. He knew instantly that they weren't amateurs. Hale, however, looked angry. "Who the hell are you?" Naomi smirked slightly. "The people saving your life." And then the fight erupted. The soldier was fast. Too fast to be just another merc. He moved with purpose, training, closing the gap between himself and Isaiah in an instant. His first strike was sharp, precise, aimed to disable. Isaiah blocked, shifted, countered with a brutal elbow to the ribs. The soldier absorbed the hit, barely flinching, and came back with a knee toward Isaiah's stomach. Naomi had her own problem. Hale's security detail reacted instantly, two of them rushing her at once. She ducked the first wild swing, pivoted, and drove a sharp heel into the side of the second man's knee. He dropped with a grunt, clutching his leg. The first one came again, swinging harder this time. Naomi caught his wrist, twisted, and drove an elbow into his throat. He staggered back, gasping for air. Isaiah and the soldier were still locked in, their fight more controlled, more dangerous. This wasn't street brawling. This was trained combat. Isaiah shifted, dodged a strike aimed at his temple, then swept the soldier's legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, rolling back to his feet instantly. Naomi saw the shift in the fight. The soldier wasn't rattled. He was testing Isaiah. Hale, meanwhile, had made the mistake of trying to run. Naomi caught him by the collar, slamming him back against the crates. "Not so fast," she muttered. The soldier took one last look at Isaiah, his eyes calculating, then made a sharp movement toward his belt. A signal flare. Naomi's eyes widened. "Isaiah!" The entire dockyard erupted into motion. Lights flooded the area as more of Kane's mercs appeared from the shadows, some emerging from the nearby boats, others stepping out from behind the shipping containers. They had walked straight into a counter-trap. Isaiah exhaled slowly. "Guess Kane really was expecting us." Naomi released Hale, stepping back toward Isaiah, her shoulders rolling loose, ready. "Then we make it expensive." The soldier smirked slightly. And then all hell broke loose. The dockyard erupted into chaos. The moment the soldier fired the flare, the shadows came alive. Dozens of men, not just mercenaries but trained operators, stepped out from behind shipping containers, from boats docked just beyond the yard, from elevated positions Naomi hadn't even spotted before. Kane's men had been waiting. Naomi and Isaiah were surrounded. The soldier smirked slightly as he straightened, dusting off his sleeves like he already knew how this was going to end. He glanced at Hale, who was still pinned between Naomi and the crates. "Told you," he muttered. "They don't leave loose ends." Hale's face paled. "Wait!" The soldier didn't wait. He struck fast, a single sharp blow to Hale's throat, sending the arms dealer crumpling to the ground. Hale gasped for air, clutching at his neck. But the soldier had already turned his attention back to Isaiah and Naomi. Isaiah tensed, shifting his stance as the mercenaries around them tightened the noose. "Looks like Kane sent the welcoming committee." Naomi exhaled slowly, her fingers flexing, scanning the faces around them. No way out, no cover. Too many weapons trained on them. The soldier tilted his head slightly, considering them. "You should have walked away." Naomi gave him a small, sharp grin. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing." And then they moved. Isaiah lunged first, closing the distance between him and the soldier before anyone could react. He drove a brutal knee into the man's ribs, followed by a sharp elbow to his jaw. The soldier absorbed the hit, staggering, but he was ready. He shifted, countering with a lightning-fast strike to Isaiah's side, forcing him to step back. At the same time, Naomi ducked under a wide swing from one of the mercenaries, twisted, and grabbed his wrist, using his own momentum to send him crashing into another man behind him. They both went down hard. The dockyard exploded into pure combat. Isaiah blocked a strike, countered, and drove a vicious punch into his attacker's ribs, feeling something crack under the force. He pivoted, dodging another blow, then caught a man's arm and wrenched it, flipping him onto the hard concrete. Naomi wasn't slowing down either. A merc grabbed for her, trying to lock her in place, but she shifted fast, slipping out of his grip before driving a sharp kick into the side of his knee. He howled in pain, dropping, and Naomi followed up with a savage elbow to the back of his head, knocking him out cold. The soldier recovered fast. He launched himself at Isaiah again, this time with more force, more intent. Isaiah barely dodged a brutal punch aimed for his throat, twisting to the side as the soldier came at him with pure speed and precision. They exchanged a rapid series of blows, their movements almost a blur. Trained fighters, each anticipating the other's next move. But Isaiah was faster. The soldier overextended for a split second, and Isaiah exploited it, stepping in and slamming his palm into the man's sternum, sending him staggering backward. Naomi ducked as another merc tried to grab her from behind, twisting in his grip and driving a sharp knee into his ribs, then finishing him with a quick, brutal strike to the side of his head. They were winning, but barely. The mercenaries were disciplined, not like the street-level thugs they'd fought before. These were operators, trained men who weren't just throwing wild punches. They moved with precision, cutting off escape angles, forcing Isaiah and Naomi toward a disadvantage. One of them got a hit in. A sharp strike landed against Isaiah's ribs, sending a jolt of pain through his torso. He gritted his teeth, rolling with it, but it slowed him for half a second too long. The soldier recovered and came back hard, catching Isaiah with a brutal kick to the side. Isaiah staggered, and before he could react, the soldier closed the distance, locked an arm around his throat, and forced him down to one knee. Naomi turned at the sound, but she had her own problems. 3 men closing in, cutting her off. The soldier tightened his grip around Isaiah's neck, voice steady despite the chaos. "This is how it ends," he muttered. "You lost the moment you started digging." Isaiah clenched his jaw, struggling against the hold, his vision tilting slightly as the pressure increased. And then a sharp whistle cut through the night. Everyone froze. A new voice, calm, controlled, powerful, spoke from the darkness. "That's enough!" The soldier immediately let go of Isaiah and took a step back, standing at attention. Isaiah coughed, sucking in a sharp breath, and Naomi took a defensive stance, her eyes scanning the area, trying to locate the source of the voice. Then, out of the shadows, he stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in tactical gear that wasn't flashy, but effective. His presence alone shifted the energy in the dockyard. He didn't need weapons drawn. He was the weapon. Isaiah wiped at his mouth, his expression darkening. Cain. Cain stopped a few feet away, his gaze sharp, unreadable. He looked at Naomi first, then Isaiah, measuring them. "You two have been making a lot of noise," he said, his voice smooth, unhurried. "I don't like noise." Naomi's breath steadied, her body still primed for combat. "Guess we're just getting started, then." Cain smirked slightly, but there was no amusement in it. Just certainty. He looked at his men, then back at them. "You have no idea what you've walked into." Isaiah exhaled slowly. "Then why don't you tell us?" Cain tilted his head. "Because I want you to understand something first." His gaze hardened. "You're not the hunters here. You're the prey." The tension thickened, the weight of Cain's presence settling in. They weren't just fighting some crime boss. They were at war with a man who had already decided their fate, and he was about to show them exactly what that meant. The dockyard fell silent. Isaiah and Naomi stood tense, shoulders squared, their bodies still primed for combat. But now there was something else, a shift in the battlefield. Cain wasn't just another fighter. His presence alone changed the entire balance of power. The mercenaries stepped back, waiting, their postures rigid. There were no more cheap attacks, no more gang tactics. This was different. Cain studied them for a long moment, the dock lights casting shadows across his face. He wasn't a brute, not like Scarjaw or the other gang leaders they'd taken down. This was a soldier, and not just any soldier, a leader. Isaiah's fingers flexed, his ribs aching from the earlier hits, but his voice remained steady. "You planning to stand there and look pretty, or are we doing this?" Cain's lips twitched, the faintest ghost of a smirk. You want a fight? He nodded slightly. Then let's make it a fair one. He glanced at his men. Stand down. Naomi's brow furrowed slightly as the mercenaries lowered their weapons and stepped back, forming a wide circle. Cain wasn't going to let his men handle this. He was handling it himself. Isaiah took a slow breath, rolling his shoulders. You sure about that? Cain exhaled. Calm, methodical. I don't need backup for this. And then he moved. Isaiah barely had time to react before Cain closed the distance between them in 2 sharp steps, his fist slamming into Isaiah's ribs with brutal precision. The hit sent a shock wave of pain through his body, but Isaiah absorbed it, twisting just enough to lessen the impact before countering with a sharp elbow toward Cain's jaw. Cain blocked, parried, and delivered a devastating kick to Isaiah's knee, forcing him to step back. Naomi saw the shift immediately. Cain wasn't just strong, he was fast, experienced. His strikes meant to disable, not just hurt. This wasn't street fighting. This was pure combat training. She didn't wait. Naomi launched herself forward, her movements a blur, aiming for a weak spot in Cain's defenses. She faked high, then went low, aiming a brutal kick toward his ribs. Cain adjusted at the last second, catching her foot, twisting it mid-air to send her off balance. But Naomi was faster than he expected. She used the momentum to spin, twisting out of his grip, landing a sharp knee to his side before rolling back into position. Cain barely reacted. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. Impressive, he muttered. Then he came at her. Naomi barely dodged the first strike, but the second clipped her shoulder, sending a sharp jolt of pain through her arm. Cain followed up immediately, grabbing her wrist and twisting it, trying to force her down. But Naomi shifted, rolling with the pressure instead of fighting against it, flipping herself out of his grasp and bringing her elbow down toward his spine. Cain moved at the last second, sidestepping, adjusting like he had been expecting it. Isaiah was back on his feet, rushing in. He slammed his fist into Cain's ribs, driving forward with force, but Cain absorbed the hit, turned, and caught Isaiah's wrist. Before Isaiah could adjust, Cain wrenched his arm, twisted his stance, and slammed him onto the ground. Isaiah hit hard, but he didn't stay down. Naomi lunged again, fast, relentless, her strikes precise and unyielding. Cain blocked one, dodged another, but then she landed a solid blow to his ribs. A real hit. For the first time, Cain grunted. Isaiah saw the opening and took it. He surged forward, grabbed Cain by the collar, and drove his knee into the man's stomach. Cain stumbled back slightly, but then he smiled. Isaiah barely had time to register it before Cain retaliated, striking with speed and power. His fists crashed against Isaiah's ribs, his knee slammed into Naomi's side, and before they could recover, he had both of them on the defensive again. Cain wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to outlast. Naomi realized it then. He was testing them. Not just their skill, their endurance, their adaptability. Cain wanted to see how long they could fight before they broke. Isaiah exhaled hard, bracing himself. Naomi shifted beside him, adjusting her stance. Cain watched them carefully, calculating, considering. Then, finally, he spoke. You're better than I expected. He rolled his shoulders, unfazed by the hits he had taken. But you're still predictable. That's your weakness. Naomi wiped the sweat from her brow, her breathing measured. Predictable, she repeated, tilting her head. So you knew we were going to do this? Cain exhaled through his nose. I knew you'd come, but I didn't expect you to last this long. Isaiah smirked slightly, shaking out his sore wrist. Disappointed? Cain's gaze darkened. Not at all. It just means I need to stop holding back. Before either of them could react, Cain moved again, faster than before, more aggressive, more decisive. Isaiah blocked the first strike but missed the second. Naomi dodged a kick but got caught in a brutal grapple. And suddenly, they weren't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to survive. The fight wasn't going their way. Isaiah and Naomi had fought skilled men before, but Cain was different. Every move he made was calculated, precise, not just an attack, but a setup for the next one. Isaiah's ribs ached from the last hit, But he adjusted, staying loose, keeping his breathing steady. Naomi mirrored him, circling from the other side. Cain hadn't slowed down at all. If anything, he looked more controlled than before. Isaiah feinted, throwing a quick jab toward Cain's shoulder before shifting low, aiming a sharp strike at his ribs. Cain caught his wrist mid-motion, twisted, and slammed a knee into his side. Isaiah gritted his teeth and forced himself to roll with the hit, breaking free before Cain could capitalize. Naomi followed up instantly, weaving into Cain's space, throwing sharp, rapid strikes. Cain parried fast, moving like he was reading her before she even made contact. She landed a solid hit to his ribs, but before she could follow up, he grabbed her wrist, turned, and flipped her over his shoulder. She hit the ground hard, but tucked her roll, springing back up before Cain could follow through. Isaiah saw the moment Cain's stance shifted. A tell most wouldn't catch. Cain wasn't fighting them anymore. He was studying them, and that's when the mercenaries moved in. Two came for Isaiah first, their strikes coordinated. He dodged a punch, caught the second attacker's arm, yanked him forward, and slammed an elbow into his face. The merc staggered, but the other one was already swinging. Isaiah turned, absorbing the hit to his shoulder, before retaliating with a brutal hook to the ribs. Naomi had her own hands full. One of the mercs grabbed her from behind, locking his arms around her in a tight hold. She snapped her head back, smashing his nose, then twisted, grabbing his wrist and flipping him over onto the ground. Another came at her, swinging fast. She ducked low, swept his legs, and followed up with a sharp kick to his ribs before moving on to the next one. For a moment, they were holding their ground. Then Cain's footwork shifted again. He closed the distance on Isaiah in 2 steps, feinting left before snapping a hard strike into his ribs. Isaiah barely blocked, but the force sent him stumbling. Cain followed up with a quick pivot, aiming a sharp elbow toward Isaiah's jaw. But Naomi intercepted, kicking his arm mid-motion, forcing him to adjust. Cain turned to her, his expression steady, not even winded. He swung low, aiming for her leg. Naomi hopped back just in time, but it gave Cain an opening. He surged forward, grabbed her collar, and drove her backward into a shipping container. The impact sent a sharp jolt through her spine, but she countered fast, driving a knee into his side and forcing him off her. Isaiah came in from behind, wrapping an arm around Cain's throat in a tight lock. For the first time, Cain tensed, but he didn't panic. Cain grabbed Isaiah's wrist, shifted his stance, and threw him over his shoulder in a brutal breakaway move. Isaiah hit the pavement hard, pain exploding through his back. Before he could recover, Cain planted a boot against his chest, pinning him. Naomi moved to intercept, but 3 mercs blocked her path. She dodged a punch, twisted under another, drove a sharp strike into one of their throats before shoving past them, but the delay was enough. Isaiah struggled against Cain's weight, but Cain didn't press down. He was holding him there, making a point. Then they all heard it. Sirens. The air shifted. The mercenaries hesitated. The sound grew louder. Dozens of engines closing in fast. Cain exhaled slowly. He glanced toward the dock entrance, where the blue and red glow of approaching vehicles flickered against the steel containers. Then, just like that, he stepped back. Isaiah sat up fast, still tense, still ready to fight. But Cain wasn't looking at him anymore. He was watching the approaching police response, his expression unreadable. Naomi wiped her mouth, glancing at Isaiah, then back at Cain. That's it? Cain's men had already started to retreat, moving like professionals. Fast, clean, no wasted movement. The fight was over, but not because they had won. Because Cain had chosen to end it. Isaiah pushed himself to his feet, breathing hard, watching as Cain turned away, giving one sharp signal to his remaining men. Within seconds, they were disappearing into the maze of containers, slipping away before the police fully arrived. Naomi watched them go, tension still coiled in her muscles. She hated this. Winning without winning. Isaiah rolled his shoulders, glancing at her. We chasing them? Naomi exhaled, running a hand through her hair. Not right now. The first police vehicles skidded into the dockyard, tires screeching against pavement, officers piling out, weapons raised. She turned her back on the flashing lights and started walking. "Let's get out of here." Naomi and Isaiah moved quickly through the darkened back streets near the dockyard, their breathing steady despite the bruises settling deep in their muscles. The fight with Cain hadn't just been physical. It had been a warning. Cain hadn't tried to kill them. He had tested them. And when the sirens came, he had chosen to retreat, not out of fear, but because he had another move to make. Naomi wasn't going to let him make it. Isaiah pulled out his phone, checking messages as they slipped through an alleyway toward their safe house. "Morales has been calling," he muttered. "She's gonna be pissed we didn't stick around." Naomi didn't stop walking. "She should be thanking us." Isaiah huffed. "Yeah, because nearly getting killed at the docks was such a gift." Naomi shot him a look, but didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. They had been outnumbered, outmatched, and outplanned. And yet, Cain hadn't finished them off. That meant something. They reached the safe house, a rundown two-story building tucked between abandoned warehouses. Isaiah double-checked their surroundings before unlocking the door, stepping inside first. Naomi shut it behind them and immediately pulled out her laptop. Isaiah dropped onto the couch, stretching out his sore limbs. "You're really gonna start working now?" Naomi didn't answer. She was already typing. Isaiah sighed, running a hand over his face. "You know, normal people sleep after almost getting their ribs caved in." Naomi glanced up briefly. "Normal people aren't being hunted by an ex-Special Forces psychopath running a private army." Isaiah grunted, conceding the point. The screen flickered as Naomi pulled up everything they had on Cain. The problem was, it wasn't much. Cain was a ghost, and the few records that did exist had been scrubbed, altered, or buried under layers of fake identities. But Naomi had dealt with ghosts before. She cracked her knuckles and started working through the data, cross-referencing shipments, security firms, and black market dealings. Hale said Cain was moving something big. Whatever was at that dock wasn't just another arms deal. Isaiah sat up. "You think he's relocating?" Naomi nodded. "He wouldn't burn a major operation just because of us. He's shifting. That means there's another site." Isaiah watched her work, his mind still replaying the fight. Cain hadn't been reckless. He had been studying them, adapting, the way he moved, the way he struck. It reminded Isaiah of training sessions with his old unit. Cain wasn't just some former soldier running a criminal empire. He was still operating like a tactician. The realization made Isaiah sit up straighter. He's treating this like a battlefield. Naomi's fingers paused over the keyboard. "What do you mean?" Isaiah leaned forward. "Back there, he didn't just fight us. He assessed us. He adapted to our movements, learned our tells, and then, when he was done, he didn't push for a kill. He pulled back." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Because he's not done yet." Isaiah nodded. "He's strategizing, planning the next encounter." Naomi exhaled sharply. That was worse than she'd thought. Most criminals, even the smart ones, worked with short-term plans. Cain wasn't thinking about tonight. He was thinking about the war. Her laptop dinged, breaking her thoughts. She glanced down and frowned. Isaiah saw her expression shift. "What?" Naomi tapped the screen. "A flagged financial transfer just hit one of Morales's watch lists." Isaiah moved to look. The transaction was massive. A private account funneling millions into a security firm operating out of an old industrial district on the city's outskirts. Naomi's jaw tightened. "That's not just payroll." Isaiah's expression darkened. "That's a war chest." Before they could discuss it further, Naomi's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. Morales. Naomi sighed and answered. "You're calling too much." Starting to feel like a relationship. Morales wasn't in the mood. "Shut up and listen. I just got a call from a confidential informant. Cain's people are on the move. He's regrouping." Naomi's fingers drummed against the table. "Where?" Morales hesitated. "That's the problem. It's not a hideout. It's a meeting. Cain's setting up a sit-down with someone big. High clearance. And if what my source says is true, this isn't just about his business. It's about what comes next. Isaiah and Naomi exchanged a look. Isaiah spoke first. "Who's he meeting?" Morales sighed. "I don't know. But I know where." Naomi grabbed a pen. "Give me an address." There was a pause before Morales finally said, "Edgewater Hotel. Top floor." "Tonight." Isaiah clenched his jaw. "So Kane's making a move." Morales's voice turned grim. "No, Carter. Kane's making a decision, and if you don't stop it, we're all gonna regret it." The line went dead. Naomi set the phone down, her mind already moving at full speed. Isaiah ran a hand through his hair. "We're crashing a meeting with an unknown number of high-profile targets, all armed, all ready for war." Naomi cracked her neck, closing her laptop. "Wouldn't be the first time." Isaiah smirked, despite himself. "Yeah, but this time we don't know who we're dealing with." Naomi grabbed her jacket. "Guess we'll find out." Isaiah stood, exhaling slowly. "You realize he's expecting this, right?" Naomi didn't hesitate. "Of course." Isaiah pulled his hoodie over his head and followed her toward the door. "Then let's not disappoint him." They stepped into the night, the city lights stretching before them. Because tonight, they weren't just hunting Kane. They were interrupting whatever move he was about to make. And whether he expected them or not, he was going to feel it. The Edgewater Hotel loomed over the city, its glass facade reflecting the glow of the streets below. A place built for the rich and powerful, where deals were made behind closed doors, and where men like Kane surrounded themselves with walls of security. He had chosen this place as his last stronghold, believing he was still in control, believing that no one could touch him. He was wrong. Naomi sat in a parked car 3 blocks away, her laptop balanced on her knees, fingers moving swiftly over the keyboard. The hotel's security system was top tier. Layers of firewalls, encrypted access points, redundant backups. But Naomi had already spent days preparing for this. She had mapped every weak point, every digital blind spot, and had buried a back door into the system that no one had noticed until now. Isaiah's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Tell me we're in." Naomi smirked as the last security override blinked green on her screen. "We're in." She had already taken control of the elevator system, the keycard access, even the emergency response protocols. Kane had fortified himself in the penthouse, but Naomi had sealed all other exits. There was only one way in, and Isaiah was already moving. He walked up to the hotel's west entrance, blending in with the late-night crowd, his stolen keycard already programmed to get him past the first level of security. He moved through the side corridors unnoticed, slipping into the service hallway where the private elevator was waiting. Naomi's voice guided him through his earpiece. "Camera feeds are looped. Security logs are wiped. You have a straight shot to the top." Isaiah stepped into the elevator, swiping the key card. The doors closed silently, and the numbers began to climb. "Any movement inside?" he asked. Naomi's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Kane's got 6 mercenaries posted throughout the penthouse, 2 near the entrance, 2 watching the lounge area, 1 outside the master suite, and 1 near the service access door." She paused. "They're on alert. I think they know something's off." Isaiah rolled his shoulders. "Good. Let them be ready." The elevator dinged softly as it reached the top floor. Isaiah stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, the air heavy with tension. The penthouse entrance stood at the end, 2 armed guards positioned just outside. He didn't give them time to react. The first guard barely turned before Isaiah closed the distance, grabbing his wrist and twisting sharply, forcing his weapon downward before driving a vicious elbow into his throat. The man crumpled, choking on his breath. The second guard reached for his gun, but Isaiah was faster. He kicked the weapon aside, spun into a sharp hook, and followed up with a knee strike that sent the man sprawling against the doorframe. Naomi's voice came through. "You're clear for now, but you just set off an internal alert. Kane's guys inside know you're here." Isaiah didn't hesitate. He pushed through the penthouse doors. The room was sprawling and luxurious. Glass walls overlooking the city, modern furniture neatly arranged around a central seating area. A bar lined with top-shelf liquor stood to one side, and expensive artwork hung on the walls. And standing at the far end, watching him calmly, was Kane. He was dressed in a crisp black suit, his expression unreadable. Behind him, 4 mercenaries moved into position, weapons drawn. Isaiah didn't slow down. One of the mercenaries lunged first, but Isaiah sidestepped, grabbing his arm and twisting it into a brutal lock before slamming him face first into the marble counter. The second mercenary came in fast, throwing a punch aimed for Isaiah's ribs. He blocked, countered with a sharp jab to the throat, then spun and swept the man's legs out from under him. A third mercenary charged from the side, swinging wildly. Isaiah ducked low, let the punch sail over his head, then drove a brutal uppercut into the man's jaw, sending him crashing backward. The last mercenary was smarter. He waited, observing, looking for an opening. Isaiah adjusted his stance, motioning him forward. "Come on, then." The mercenary hesitated. And then Naomi's voice cut through the comms. "Isaiah! Incoming!" Isaiah barely had time to react before Kane himself moved. He was fast. Not just trained, disciplined. The kind of fighter who had spent years honing his skills. Kane closed the distance, launching a precise, calculated strike. Isaiah blocked, countered, but Kane adjusted instantly, shifting his weight, twisting into a brutal knee aimed at Isaiah's ribs. Isaiah barely twisted out of the way in time, his breath coming sharp as he reset his stance. Kane was studying him, waiting for the next move, his expression still maddeningly calm. "Not bad," Kane murmured. "You don't fight like a street brawler. That's military." Isaiah wiped blood from his lip. "And you don't fight like a businessman." Kane smirked. "I never was one." He moved again, faster this time, sharper. Isaiah ducked, sidestepped, caught Kane's wrist mid-swing, and countered with a crushing elbow to the ribs. Kane grunted, but he didn't falter. Instead, he grabbed Isaiah's collar, yanked him forward, and slammed him against the glass wall. The city lights blurred behind them as they grappled, 2 men trained for war, fighting in a battlefield made of wealth and power. Naomi's voice came through again. "Urgent. Security's coming up. We don't have much time." Isaiah twisted free, rammed Kane against the bar counter, and locked his arm behind his back. "You're done," Isaiah said through gritted teeth. Kane let out a short breath, a ghost of a smirk still lingering. "You think so?" Naomi's voice came sharp. "Isaiah, you need to move. Now." The penthouse doors burst open. Security flooded in. The penthouse doors burst open, and Isaiah knew he was in trouble. Kane's security didn't hesitate. They weren't here to scare him. They were here to eliminate him. The first mercenary lunged, swinging a baton toward his ribs. Isaiah twisted just in time, absorbing the impact along his forearm before countering with a brutal knee to the man's stomach. The mercenary staggered, but another was already closing in. A punch flew toward Isaiah's head. He ducked, but the second mercenary was faster than expected, slamming a fist into his side. Pain flared, but he didn't have time to register it before another grabbed him from behind, locking his arms in place. A fourth attacker moved in, delivering a vicious punch to Isaiah's ribs. He gritted his teeth, trying to wrench free, but they were trained for this. They fought like a unit, coordinated, efficient, overwhelming. He wasn't going to win this fight alone. 3 blocks away, Naomi sat in a dark sedan, her laptop balanced on her knees, eyes scanning the hacked hotel security feed. The penthouse cameras had given her a front-row seat to the ambush, and it wasn't looking good. Isaiah had already taken down 2, but the mercenaries were pressing their advantage. One had him in a chokehold, another lined up for a finishing blow. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She tried to delay reinforcements, shutting down the stairwell access and rerouting security alerts, but there were too many. Isaiah wasn't going to last much longer. Naomi didn't think. She acted. She shoved the laptop onto the passenger seat, threw the car into gear, and sped toward the hotel. The moment she pulled up, she was already moving. She slipped into the side alley, swiping a stolen staff key card Isaiah had left behind for her as a backup. The service door clicked open, and she stepped inside. She was moving fast now. She ignored the elevators, too slow. Instead, she took the stairs, two at a time, her breathing steady, her focus razor-sharp. Isaiah was fighting alone. That wasn't going to last much longer. Pain flared through Isaiah's ribs as another mercenary landed a heavy blow. The one behind him tightened his chokehold, cutting off his airflow. One of the mercenaries stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Stay down, and this will be over quick." Isaiah gritted his teeth. "Yeah?" He shifted his stance. "Not really my thing." He threw his head back, smashing it into the nose of the man choking him. The grip loosened just enough, and Isaiah broke free. He twisted, elbowed one attacker in the throat, then spun and drove a vicious hook into another's ribs. The mercenary gasped, but another took his place immediately, swinging a baton toward Isaiah's head. Isaiah dodged, but not fast enough. The baton clipped his temple, sending him staggering. His vision blurred for a second. Another blow slammed into his side, forcing him down onto one knee. They had him, and then the lights cut out. The alarms blared. In the confusion, Naomi struck. The first mercenary never saw her coming. She grabbed him from behind, slamming her knife deep into his side and twisting. He gasped, staggering forward, blood soaking his shirt. Before the others could react, she was already moving to the next target. A second mercenary turned. Naomi was faster. She kicked his knee in, grabbed the back of his head, and drove it into the edge of the bar counter. The impact sent a spray of blood across the glass surface as he crumpled. Isaiah saw his opening. He wrenched free from his captor's grip and slammed his elbow into the man's ribs. Before the mercenary could recover, Isaiah twisted his arm and drove him face first into the glass coffee table. The glass shattered, jagged edges slicing through his attacker's skin. Naomi ducked under a wild punch from another mercenary, grabbed his arm, and flipped him over her shoulder, slamming him hard onto the floor. Isaiah, now fully back in the fight, caught the last mercenary mid-charge, dodged left, and drove his knee into the man's stomach before throwing a brutal punch to his jaw. The room fell silent, except for Cain, still standing near the bar, watching. Naomi wiped blood from her lip, catching her breath. "You've got nowhere left to run, Cain." Cain exhaled slowly, adjusting his suit jacket, his expression still frustratingly composed. "You two really don't know when to stop, do you?" he muttered. Isaiah stepped forward, rolling his shoulders, his knuckles raw. "Not when the job isn't finished." Cain glanced toward the exit, but Naomi moved fast, cutting off his path. "Don't," she warned. For the first time, Cain's calm flickered. He wasn't used to being cornered. He wasn't used to fights he couldn't walk away from. Isaiah stepped closer. "You had everything planned, didn't you? Thought you had us figured out." He shook his head. "But you never planned for this. You never planned for us." Cain's jaw tightened. "You think you've won?" Naomi smirked. "No, but we know you've lost." Cain suddenly lashed out. He moved with military precision, fast, controlled. Naomi barely dodged as he struck first, grabbing her wrist and twisting hard. Her knife clattered to the floor. Isaiah lunged at Cain, but Cain pivoted, sidestepped, and slammed an elbow into Isaiah's ribs. Pain shot through his side, but he gritted his teeth and pressed forward. Cain threw a punch, but Isaiah caught it mid-air. For a second, they were locked in place, muscles tensed, strength against strength. Then Naomi drove her fist into Cain's side, sending him staggering. Isaiah followed up, grabbing Cain by the collar and slamming him against the wall. Cain coughed, struggling for breath, but Isaiah didn't let up. This was payback. Then, from outside the penthouse, the sound of sirens filled the air. Naomi pulled out her earpiece. "Morales! We have him!" The penthouse doors swung open again. This time, it was the police. The penthouse doors swung open, and the room was suddenly flooded with the sound of boots on marble, weapons cocking, and shouted commands. "Hands where we can see them!" The police poured in, tactical teams moving with precision, sweeping the room for threats. Morales led the charge, her badge flashing as she stepped past the officers, her sharp eyes scanning the wreckage of the fight. The once luxurious penthouse was a battlefield now. Glass shards littered the floor. Blood was smeared across expensive leather furniture, and unconscious mercenaries lay scattered, their bodies twisted where they had fallen. Isaiah stepped back, rolling his sore shoulder, bruises already forming beneath his torn shirt. Naomi exhaled, wiping a streak of blood from her forehead, as she watched the police secure the scene. "Jesus," Morales muttered, surveying the damage. She glanced at Isaiah and Naomi. "You two really don't do things halfway, do you?" Naomi smirked, breath still steady despite the chaos. "Halfway gets you killed." Isaiah ran a hand over his face, shaking his head. "Took you long enough?" Morales shot him a look. "I told you to wait." Naomi crossed her arms. "Yeah, well, patience isn't our strong suit." The officers quickly went to work, zip-tying the mercenaries still conscious enough to resist. One groaned as he was pulled upright, blood trailing down the side of his head. The officer gripping him pressed him hard against the wall. "You have the right to remain silent. If you're smart, you'll use it," the officer muttered, tightening the restraints. Isaiah and Naomi stepped aside as the mercenaries were hauled off, one by one, their weapons confiscated, their gear stripped away. The leader of Cain's hired muscle, a broad-shouldered man with a busted lip and swelling eye, tried to make one last stand. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he growled at Morales. She arched a brow. "You're right, but I know who's going to be processing you in county lockup. And trust me, they don't like mercs who get caught." The man opened his mouth, then shut it, jaw tightening as he was dragged out with the others. Two officers approached Morales, carrying a stack of files, flash drives, and a laptop they had found in Cain's private office. "Lieutenant, you're gonna want to see this," one of them said, holding out a folder thick with documents, financial records, offshore accounts, coded communications. "This is everything." Naomi took a step forward, glancing at the folder before looking at Morales. "If you crack that, you'll have the names of every politician, banker, and corrupt official who ever worked with Cain." Morales took it, flipping through the pages. "I'll make sure this gets into the right hands." Isaiah let out a breath, shaking his head. "That's a hell of a lot of dirt to sort through." Naomi smirked. "Good thing Morales likes paperwork." Morales shot her a glare, but there was a hint of amusement behind it. "I hate you both." Cain smirked, but there was no real confidence behind it this time. He simply nodded, as if accepting his fate. "See you around," he murmured. Naomi tilted her head. "No, you won't." The officers pulled him toward the exit, dragging him through the shattered remains of his empire. The moment he stepped out, the reporters waiting below lit up with flashes of cameras, microphones shoved forward, questions screamed over each other. But Cain didn't look at them. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. Inside the penthouse, Morales let out a long breath. "Well, that's one hell of a night." Isaiah stretched, rolling his sore shoulder. "You're telling me." Naomi cracked her neck. "So what happens next?" Morales flipped open the folder again, scanning the evidence they had collected. "The feds are going to have a field day with this. Cain's name alone will take years to untangle from the system, but with this much evidence, he's not getting out." Isaiah nodded. "And the city?" Morales glanced out the window, where police lights flashed against the skyline. "This is the first time in a long time that people aren't going to wake up to another name taking Cain's place." She looked back at them. "You two did that," Naomi smirked. "We're not looking for a thank you." Morales chuckled, shaking her head. "Good, because you're not getting one." Isaiah grinned. "Fair enough." Morales rubbed her temple, exhaustion finally catching up. "I need to get this all logged. You two, go home, get some sleep. Try not to break any more laws for at least 24 hours. Naomi smirked. "No promises." Isaiah clapped Morales on the shoulder. "You did good tonight." She gave him a tired smile. "So did you." As the police secured the penthouse, bagging up every last bit of evidence, Isaiah and Naomi finally stepped outside. For the first time in a long time, there was no fight left to chase. The city was different now, and it was finally theirs again. The city had felt like it belonged to Cain for years. His presence had been woven into every street, every deal, every layer of corruption that ran through the system. People whispered his name like an inevitable force, something too powerful to fight, too deep-rooted to ever be removed. But now, the city belonged to itself again. Kane was gone, dragged out of the Edgewater Hotel in handcuffs, forced through a mob of reporters as the cameras flashed like fireworks. His empire crumbled behind him. The mercenaries who had fought for him were processed, booked, and locked away. The high-ranking members of his organization who hadn't already fled were rounded up within days. His financial records, offshore accounts, and coded transactions had been handed over to federal investigators. Every piece of his carefully hidden fortune was now seized, traced, or frozen. And Scarjaw, the man who once terrorized the streets under Kane's rule, had cut a deal. He flipped, turned in names, locations, and every bit of intel he had to save himself from rotting in prison. Isaiah had read the report with satisfaction. Loyalty only ran so deep when there was no power left to protect it. Without Kane's leadership, the gang had fractured. What was once a single dominant force became scattered factions. Some tried to hold on to territory, but without protection, they were picked off by rival gangs or arrested by the police. Others went into hiding, trying to escape the inevitable crackdown. But the truth was clear. Kane's rule was over. The real victory wasn't in the courtroom or in the precinct, or even in the federal offices combing through Kane's financial empire. It was in the streets. For years, the neighborhoods had been under constant fear. Businesses forced to pay for protection. Families too afraid to speak out. Kids growing up surrounded by violence they could never escape. Now, they were free. Isaiah and Naomi took a walk through one of the old districts, a place that had once been one of Kane's strongholds. The last time they had been here, the air had been thick with tension, with the unspoken rule that everyone knew who was in charge. But now, the air felt different. The same shops that had once been forced to close early were staying open late. Street vendors, once terrified of being shaken down, were back on the corners, selling food, playing music, talking without looking over their shoulders. A barbershop that had been routinely extorted by Kane's men now had its doors propped open, laughter spilling into the streets. Isaiah let out a slow breath as he took it in. "Feels strange." Naomi walked beside him, hands in her pockets, watching as a group of kids played basketball on a court that had once been a gang hangout. She tilted her head slightly. "Feels right." A few people recognized them as they passed. Not with fear, not with suspicion, just quiet nods, a silent acknowledgement. They knew, everyone knew, and they wouldn't forget. An older man sweeping outside his convenience store paused when he saw them. He studied them for a long moment, then smirked. "You two are the reason things are different now, huh?" Naomi shrugged. "We had help," the man nodded, setting his broom against the wall. "Yeah, but nobody ever fought back like that before. People talk. They know who made this happen." Isaiah chuckled, rubbing his knuckles. "We're not looking for a parade." The man let out a rough laugh. "Good, because you ain't getting one." He turned back to his shop, but before he disappeared inside, he added, "But you are getting free coffee whenever you want." Naomi smirked. "I'll take that." Isaiah shook his head as they kept walking. "Never doubted it." Without Kane, the remnants of the gang were leaderless. Some of them tried to regroup, to carve out new territory. They didn't last long. Morales had officers sweeping the city, making arrests, shutting down every remaining operation. Any gang members still trying to hold on were quickly realizing that their time was up. The ones who had been smart, they disappeared. The ones who weren't, they ended up in cuffs. Within weeks, what was left of Kane's empire was nothing more than a ghost of what it had been. And no one was scared anymore. The police presence remained strong in the areas that had suffered the most. It would take time for things to fully settle, but for the first time in years, people had hope. Without Kane's influence, corrupt officials lost their power. Business owners took back control, and the streets that had once been Kane's personal kingdom belonged to the people again. The violence, the fear, The stranglehold. It was gone. Isaiah exhaled, glancing at Naomi as they reached the end of the block. Feels like we did something real this time. Naomi smirked slightly, watching as a mother walked her child home without having to look over her shoulder. We did. For the first time in a long time, the city was quiet. Not the tense, suffocating silence of a city waiting for the next fight, but the calm of something finally at peace. Cain's era was over, and the city was finally free. The old rooftop hadn't changed much. Isaiah and Naomi had sat up here countless times before. Years ago, before deployments, before war, before the city had become a battlefield of its own. Back then, they had stared out over the skyline, dreaming about the world beyond the streets they grew up in, wondering what was waiting for them outside the limits of their childhood. Now, after everything, they were back. The night air was crisp, carrying the distant hum of the city beneath them. The skyline stretched wide, the lights of the buildings flickering like stars against the darkness. But the city below wasn't the same. Neither were they. Isaiah sat with his elbows resting on his knees, silent, thoughtful. His ribs still ached from the fight. His knuckles were bruised, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't tense. Naomi sat beside him, one knee pulled up, arms resting loosely around it, staring out into the open sky. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They had spent their lives moving from one battle to the next. A mission would end, and another would begin. An enemy would fall, and another would rise. It had been a cycle, endless, relentless. But this time, there was no next fight waiting for them. No war on the horizon. Just this, quiet. Isaiah exhaled, breaking the silence first. Feels weird, doesn't it? Naomi glanced at him. What does? He gestured toward the streets below. Not having another fight lined up. Not tracking the next target. Planning the next move. We spent so long tearing things down. I don't even know what comes after that. Naomi tilted her head slightly, considering his words. Maybe we don't need to know yet. Isaiah let out a dry chuckle. That's a first. Naomi smirked. We've never been good at staying still. Maybe it's time we try. Isaiah shook his head, staring down at the streets, watching the distant glow of headlights passing through intersections, the faint sound of laughter rising from below. The city had survived Cain, and so had they. You think Morales has everything under control? Isaiah asked. Naomi shrugged. She'll be fine. Cain's network is dust. The city's safer. We did what we came to do. She paused before adding, and Morales is probably still mad at us, which means she'll work twice as hard just to prove a point. Isaiah smirked. Sounds about right. The breeze moved through the rooftop, bringing with it the familiar scent of home. City smoke, asphalt cooling after a long day, the distant smell of street food from blocks away. It had been so long since they had just been here, in their own neighborhood, without a mission to complete or a fight to win. Isaiah rubbed at a sore spot on his shoulder, letting out a slow breath. So what now? Naomi leaned back on her hands, looking up at the stars. We live. Isaiah glanced at her, raising a brow. Just like that? Naomi smirked. Yeah, just like that. He exhaled, rolling the idea around in his head. Living. They had spent so long surviving. Through war, through battles, through the weight of everything they had done, and everything they had lost. They had spent years fighting so that other people could have peace. Maybe it was time they let themselves have some too. Isaiah leaned back, mirroring her stance, staring up at the same stars they had watched as kids, before they had known what war really was. I think I could get used to that, he admitted. Naomi smirked. You? Relaxing? I'll believe it when I see it. Isaiah chuckled. I'll prove you wrong. Naomi stretched her arms above her head, letting out a satisfied sigh. All right, Carter. First step to living. You need food. And since I saved your ass back at the hotel, I say I get to pick the spot. Isaiah scoffed. You're still bringing that up? Naomi smirked. Oh, I'm bringing it up for the rest of your life. He groaned, standing up and rolling his shoulder again. Fine. But you're paying. Naomi arched a brow. What happened to living? Isaiah grinned. I never said I'd stop hustling. Naomi shook her head, laughing as they climbed down from the rooftop, back into the city they had fought for, back into the life they were finally free to live. For the first time in years, there was no mission ahead, no war to fight, no enemy left to track, just them, and whatever came next. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.